Welcome to the PNA Community Newspaper Forum. This session is Diversify Your Revenue Stream by Creating a Digital Agency. I want to thank Matt and the PNA team even for putting this all together and even making the introduction that I'm going to read here, making this virtually idiot-proof. So to get started, my name is insert name from insert publication. No, I'm just kidding. My name is John Durr from the Chestnut Hill Local in Philadelphia. I'm pleased to welcome you to the PNA Community Newspaper Forum. I will tell you that there is only one Gordon Borrell. If you don't believe me, Google his name. You'll have to go 11 pages into Google to find anything other than that Gordon Borrell. If you Google your own name, you're going to see other people's obituaries with your name. You'll see, I see a bunch of tractors, but there's only one Gordon. So number 4, to improve the attendee experience, we are asking everyone to stay muted throughout the training. No matter how tempted you might be to heckle Gordon during the session, please show some restraint. Many newspapers successfully started their digital agencies more than a decade ago to diversify their revenue stream. However, many more are considering this option now and are unsure of the potential revenue and the pitfalls. Today, we are joined by media expert Gordon Borrell. Gordon will share what he has learned from newspapers who have succeeded as well as those who have failed, and will help you avoid making the same costly mistakes. So without further delay, here he is, the pride of Germantown and possibly a distant cousin of mine, Gordon Borrell. Gordon?
Thank you, John, and thank you everybody for inviting me to this and having me here and for enduring me for the next 57 minutes. I'm going to turn my webcam off in a moment because I just got a notice saying that the bandwidth is kind of slow, even though we put a new router in last week. So you won't see my extremely handsome and pleasant face. I got up early this morning, as I told the organizers, to do my hair just for this. So my presentation style is very fast. I have lots and lots of detail and research there, so I think you'll appreciate it. But I also think you will definitely want some of these slides. And at the end of this presentation, you will see a URL to be able to download them if you would like. During the presentation, if you'd like to type in questions, Matt's going to monitor them and interrupt me. I'll stop a couple of times, but I will leave some time, maybe 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions. Depends on how many I get during the presentation, but I will leave some time for that. So let's go. The presentation itself is called Diversifying Your Revenue Stream by Digital Agency. I looked at, I believe it was 34. I thought I would rename it first of all by creating a digital agency. We did a survey of you, folks on this call and other folks at PNA on a number of things. And you're going to see the results in here, but there's particular on slide 34 that made me go, So we'll get to that. Here's the agenda. I want to talk about this year's storm to kind of set things up for you, to tell you what's happening this year. It's actually a very exciting time. I want to look at some research on that we launched through newspapers to look at their advertisers, local businesses, people who do business with newspapers, and how they view newspapers. Some really fascinating stuff I want to share with you. I would talk about the size of the opportunity. People said, what is the biggest mistake that media companies have made over the past 25 years since the internet has been around? I would say the number one mistake is that they don't believe the opportunity is as big as it actually is. So that's number one. But there are other problems you're going to see in here that I will outline that look like they're solvable. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about why some digital agencies have failed. I'm going to show you some characteristics of one that haven't. But this is a very troublesome thing, and I'm going to talk quite a bit toward the end about these agencies themselves. A lot of the information you're going to see here isn't pertaining specifically to agencies. but you'll see how it just kind of comes together. I don't know why I'm looking at the camera. You can't even see me. Um, so, which is a comforting thing. I can just sit here and pop a beer open. You wouldn't know. I'm going to get to your questions at the end, as I mentioned. So is everybody ready? Here we go. We got a very different storm than we had in 2020 when things were very dire for a lot of people, and it looks like it's going to be raining money, at least marketing and advertising dollars. Advertising dollars are flowing very nicely. It didn't start until the second quarter of this year, right around April, and we think by summer and certainly by fall, there's going to be quite a bonanza. How do we know that? We survey advertisers every single year. We have the largest survey of local advertisers in the country, and we asked them how much they spent or were spending in the current year and how much they plan to spend in the following 12 months. And in 2015, and this was coming off the tail end still of the recession in 2009, 2010, 2011, there was a pretty significant increase. We added up all the dollars they said there was in their budget for the current year, and then how much they were planning to spend in the next 12 months, and there was a 5.5% increase. But look at the rest, and that's pretty typical. 2%, 1.5% increase in budget. That's pretty typical. We didn't ask it in 2020. We didn't have, we held it late, the survey later in the year, but we did ask it in November 2020 what they were spending that current year and what they plan to spend in 2021. And that's what we found. Now, that's not a forecast. We're not saying that advertising is going to go up 13.8%. It's just a barometer reading. And when we look at that and we see year after year after year, even right after the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, we did not see a double-digit increase. So this is really significant. It's caused by the shakeout of a lot of businesses. They died. Most of them actually spent very little money on advertising. Guess why they died? And by the businesses that spend a lot of money on advertising holding back on their budgets in 2020 and banking that money and having some PPP money as well, which some of which can be spent on marketing, and then holding back in the first quarter of this year. So what I'm telling you is, here it comes. Get your buckets ready. So let's look first, before you go out there with your buckets, how businesses view newspapers. We asked, and this is really, really interesting. I want you to stay focused on this. I'm looking at the list of attendees, and I don't see anybody. Ooh, I see one staff writer, a publisher, not too many people from the newsroom. So the newsroom people, when I show you this, are going to be pissed. But the advertising people are going to go, yeah, okay. So this is how businesses view newspapers. First of all, we asked local businesses, if your local newspaper stopped publishing tomorrow and no longer existed, what impact would it have on your community? And by the way, there were a few more businesses in this who were not newspaper advertisers, so this really isn't just newspaper advertisers. 90% of them saw a negative impact if the newspaper went away. Stop and think about that. They like their local newspaper. They don't want to see it go away. Okay, that's probably about content, but how do you define content? How do you define content? You're probably thinking, well, the newsroom, all those newsroom people, right? Well, let's look at that. This is a trustworthiness of local content. And we asked them, thinking of the news and other content provided by your local media, please rate the opinion of the trustworthiness of your local newspaper, social media, Google, local TV and cable, radio, magazines, and other print. Newspapers came up to the top. 58%, very to extremely trustworthy. That's a pretty high ranking. Moderately was another 27%. You add it to that, people think, hey, the newspaper's more trustworthy than any of these other things in its mission to inform people. Quickly, I want to call your attention to this. Keep your eye on these guys. I'll tell you why a little bit later. So this is trustworthiness of local content, and what you're thinking is content is news, right? Comprehensiveness of shopping info. This is your other mission, probably the more important one. Sorry to tell you that. Every time I say that, people from the newsroom walk out. But if you didn't help businesses sell things by helping them with their advertising, you wouldn't have enough money to pay the newsroom people and the whole damn thing would collapse, right? Okay, so this is what I've been trying to tell people. The mission that you've probably forgotten about is your mission of helping businesses sell things. Look at that. When it comes to providing information on local sales, special offers, availability, discounts, rebates, and other current shopping information. Please rate your opinion on each newspaper's blew everybody else out of the water. That is the franchise you're losing, not your news franchise. News franchise is dying because you're not generating enough money on the advertising side by helping businesses sell things. Sorry, I don't mean to yell, but then again, I do. This is really, really important. Who else is going to do it? Facebook, Google, get them on the phone. Sure, yes, I can help you. I'm Google with your advertising. No, they can't. Neither can Facebook. A lot of other people are really trying, but when you think about this, we're talking about the word comprehensive. Is television comprehensive? Hey, Memorial Day weekend, you wanted to buy a mattress or a sofa or some outdoor furniture, and you woke up Saturday morning and said, hey, I wonder what's on sale. Where did you get that information? Sunday. Wonder what's on sale. Did you tune into the radio? Did you turn on television? Did you go back to the trash bin and look at all the mail you threw out thinking there might be coupons in there? The most comprehensive bit of information about sales in the marketplace. Hell, you don't exist. You don't exist if you're selling mattresses on Memorial Day weekend and you haven't advertised in the newspaper. You can have a store sign. You might be able to do a mailer, but I hope you get my point on this. So that is a really important bit of information. I wanted to take a look at community newspaper advertisers. Now, you all are with what we'd classify as community newspapers or smaller papers. And we looked at the typical budget of a community newspaper advertiser. This is an advertiser who buys the newspaper at least once a year, usually several times a year. Their total advertising budget is $30,000. And this is an average of all the 800 or 550 respondents that we had that were buying newspaper advertising a couple of months ago. Average budget 30,000. Newspaper was the largest portion of their budget, but look at all the other things that they're buying. But stick with me. This is just the newspaper part of the budget. 27% of that 30,000 is $7,000. So that typical newspaper advertiser would be a $7,000 client. Smaller business, of course. And I'm sure some are spending 70, 80, 100,000 with you, and some are spending maybe a little less than 7,000, but that's pretty much average. So that's what they spend on newspapers. I want to show you this in a bit of a different view. If you're looking at your clients, you're seeing, wow, they're spending a lot of other money in search engine marketing, social media, online banners and online video and audio and things like that. What percent of newspaper buyers are buying those things? So here we have the answer, and it is 92% of those who are buying newspaper advertising are buying some form of digital marketing. Got me? 100% of those people we asked in that previous pie chart there averaged out to $30,000 on advertising expenditures. They were buying newspaper ads, and 92% of them are also buying some form of digital marketing. So you can see that social media was number one in terms of digital. 78% of them were buying some form of paid or sponsored ads on social media. So I think I found the problem. And the problem is that 92% of your customers are buying digital media. They're just not buying it from you. This is what we asked newspaper buyers in our March and April survey. 700 of them responded to this question. Do you plan to buy digital advertising from your newspaper sales rep? 65% said, no, we're not. You get it? Let me go back. 92% are buying. 65% said not from the newspaper. Maybe because you don't sell it. I don't know. You got to be selling at least one thing. There's a chart. Again, it's slide 34. We'll get to that. That says what I think another part of the problem is. So only 35%. There's a problem there. There's a real problem. There's something available for you to sell. You don't need to go out and get an FCC license and run a radio station to be able to sell it. You don't need to, hell, you don't even need to go out and buy a printing press to sell it. You can just sell banner advertising. There's no barrier to entry. You can sell it. They are buying it. Why not? Okay. So let's see if we can find the problem. Is the problem the effectiveness of print and digital products? We asked newspaper managers what they thought was the effectiveness of their print and digital products. And so this is side by side. The darker orange is print. So you can see it's not much different. A lot more said print was slightly effective than the digital, but pretty much they're actually saying, and again, this is newspaper buyers. Newspaper buyers are saying digital products are slightly more effective. 81% said digital products are pretty damn effective. So it's the effectiveness of the products are pretty high in terms of the advertisers. And these, again, are the advertising you buy from newspapers. So this is the digital advertising you're buying from newspapers. Your print advertising effective? Is your digital advertising that you're buying from a newspaper rep effective? So I'm telling you, the stuff that you're selling to those few advertisers that are buying it is pretty damn effective, more effective than the newspaper in a lot of cases. So another problem is maybe it's the sales rep. Are newspaper sales reps pitching digital? So there are two surveys actually here. One is the pie chart and the other is that round oval, which is Pennsylvania newspapers. What is wrong with you? 70% of the 220 newspaper managers across the country, 70% say they try to include digital in every pitch. Only 40% of you guys are trying to include digital in every pitch. Kind of wondering why. So there's also that 17% we include digital only where it makes sense, which I think is absolutely fine. But if it's solely at the sales rep's discretion, man, you've got to really trust those reps. Or we rarely or never include digital. Maybe there's a reason for that. I don't know. But we just found it kind of curious that there was such a low percentage of Pennsylvania news media folks saying they try to include digital in every pitch. Well, there's a problem. So you may be confused as to what I'm trying to tell you and what the whole conclusion of this and how it leads to digital services and digital agencies. So my point is, I want you to really begin big. I just gave you lots of information on, okay, 92% of your advertisers are buying digital, probably not from you. And the average budget for a newspaper buyer is $30,000, and 24% of that is going to digital or going to print, but there's a whole lot going to digital. Okay, let's stop. Let's take a look at the size of the opportunity out there. This should excite you. The opportunity really, I think, is much bigger than you think in your markets. And when I show this to people and I begin to show these numbers, I'm going to begin to show you some numbers for all of your markets, or not all of your markets, but I think I took about 4 or 5 Pennsylvania markets to show you. You're going to react one of two ways. More than likely, you're going to be skeptical. I think everybody should be skeptical and ask some questions, but more than likely that skepticism is going to continue. How do you know that? How big is that? Why is that number so big? I don't believe that. Doesn't most of that digital stuff go to Facebook and go negative? Okay. You're allowed to spend about 3 minutes on asking the methodology of being skeptical. After that, I raise an eyebrow to say, if you were to quit your job, the newspaper, God forbid, were to fold, and you were convinced that coin-operated battery rechargers for cars were going to be all the rage in, I don't know, State College or Harrisburg or Johnstown or places like that. And you did some research and you found that in Johnstown, the coin-operated battery rechargers for cars would be a $4 million opportunity. You were going to corner that market. You were real excited. You're going to draw down your credit card. You're going to ask family members for loans. You're going to take your savings out. You're going to corner that market for coin-operated battery recharging stations for cars. How much would you spend? How much time would you spend doubting or researching or asking the methodology of that $3 to $4 million that the size of the opportunity would be in Johnstown? Zero. You would spend zero time. So why are you skeptical of these numbers? And I'm about to show you. I'm making assumptions, but you will be. Let's go back to the budget for a second. The budget of the average newspaper advertiser, the community, smaller market newspaper advertiser, $30,000. That means 27% of that is $7,225. However, thinking small, you would think that. Thinking large, you would go, ooh, wow, look at all this digital stuff I can sell them. It's not $7,000, it's $22,000, because I now have the ability to sell search engine marketing. I can go into other print, I can go into social media, I can go into events, I can go into online banners, online video advertising, all these things you can sell. They're all products readily available to you. And suddenly you're into their budget for 72%. That's $22,000. That's 3 times what your total newspaper budget would be. This should be exciting. Let's get even more excited. I'm going to take a look at a couple more markets. This is Pittsburgh. This is 2021. Our forecast for advertising, local advertising. Advertising spent by businesses in Pittsburgh is $1 billion. And this is where it's all spent. Are you looking for the newspaper one? You shouldn't. You should be looking at the video stuff. You should be looking at paid search and targeted banners and things like that. General paid search is the largest category at 190 million, streaming video 133 million. That's huge. That is a really, really big opportunity for newspapers, that streaming video portion. So if you added up all the digital pieces of the puzzle, you go, wow, that's a huge amount of money. 60-some%, almost 70% of all advertising is in digital. But doesn't that all go to Google, Facebook, etc.? No, not all of it. In fact, $84 million remains in Pittsburgh available to local media companies. We call this the addressable portion. So of that $1 billion, there's probably 650 million or so in all of those digital slices of the pie if you added them all up. And of that, 13%, or $84 million, remains in Pittsburgh available to you. It does not go out of the market. So I'm making the number smaller for you. If you get nosebleed at $650 million in Pittsburgh and you begin to be skeptical and you say, doesn't all of that go to Facebook and Google? The answer is no, not all of it. 84 million stays in the market. If you're still skeptical, I can make the number smaller for you. I can make it down to 0 if you want to pursue nothing. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to be a smartass, but I grew up in Philadelphia and it's just the way I am. Reading, Pennsylvania, $140 million market. I'm going to make them smaller. I'm going to get into smaller and smaller markets for you. So you'll have no excuse eventually to say, wow, that's not available to me. Reading, $140 million market, paid search is 27 million, streaming video 18 million, newspapers 6 million. You get it. What's addressable? $14 million. So that's more than twice the amount of money available in the print side of the newspaper industry in Reading, Pennsylvania, an additional 14 million. Now you're not going to get 100% of that 14 million, but as you'll show in some of the benchmarks, as I'll show you in some of the benchmarks I'm about to show you, you could get 20, 30, 40, 50% of that, 60%, 50% of that would be an additional $7 million. If you got 50%, and it's perfectly doable by newspapers, I'll show you in a moment, 50% of that $14 million, you'd be making more than 100% of the newspaper spending in Reading, Pennsylvania. Let's look at State College, another market, smaller, $171 million. Streaming video, 23 million. I keep going back to that one because that one is an area where there is really not a lot of pure play competition. If I steered you toward paid search and say, hey, there's a lot you can do with paid search, who's the dominator in paid search? If I steered you toward targeted banners, the dominator in that tends to be, in that classification, tends to be Facebook. Okay, who's the dominator in streaming video? Big pure play company. It ain't there. This is the big opportunity. But there's 171 million in State College. What's the addressable portion? $12 million. The total for all newspaper advertising in State College is 7 million. The addressable portion of digital is 12 million. So much larger. And again, this is the amount of money that is collected by locally based media companies and stays in the market. All radio stations, all TV stations, all newspapers, all magazines, any other small media entity in the State College market, adding up to $12 million. That's addressable. That's what everybody's competing for. That stays in the market. All the way down to Johnstown, It's a $58 million local advertising market. The newspaper portion of that is $2.8 million. And the addressable portion is almost twice what it is for total newspaper advertising, 5.3 million, 15% of all digital digital spending stays in the market. So what's the share of that? What could you get in Johnstown as a percentage of that 5.3 million? You're not going to get 100% of that. There are other competitors in the market, radio, other newspapers, TV stations, taking a little slice here and there, maybe, etc. So here's how we can tell you what the share is. What you're looking at is a scattergram. Forget those newspaper names in a moment. I'll explain that. On the X scale at the bottom, the x-axis is number 1, which would be New York, and all the way over to 4 and 500. That's the ranking of the market. Those would be really, really small markets. So Johnstown would be in there probably between 3 and 400. State College between 2 and 300, something like that. And on the Y scale is share. This is the achievable or share that all newspapers in our survey, I'm sorry, I don't have a scale on here, but I think it's about 900 newspapers in our survey, the share of that, remember addressable advertising in each of the markets I showed you, this is the share. So you can see, yeah, some are getting close to 80%, oh, but that's the Washington Post. And then 55% or 54%, that's the New York Times. We're not like them. Dallas Morning News, 17%. Oh, that's Dallas Morning News. Big metro market. We're not like that. Okay, move your eye. And those are the only ones I could tell you because they're either public companies or the information has been leaked. We know how much money they make. We know how much money is spent in the marketplace and what's achievable. We know thus we know their share. So migrate your eyes over to the other blue dots on the upper left right-hand quadrant of this chart. And you'll see, yeah, there are a lot of newspapers that are getting above 30%. There are probably 30 in there that are getting above 30% in that upper quadrant. So multiply 30% against those achievable numbers I showed you, and that is perfectly achievable in your market. That's a really big share. That's a big, big chunk of money. The reason we do this is we want you to really be realistic. We want to know what you are chasing. So I think it's important to know if you're chasing after $500,000, $1 million, $20 million, what is it? What is it in the market? It's not the big number that we give you, like $650 million in Pittsburgh, and it's not the addressable number, like 10-15% of that, 6 million, 65 million or so. It's a share of that. So what is that share? So typically, again, in smaller rural markets, that share tends to be in the maximum 30 to 61, 62% range. That is achievable. That's what other companies in our survey, we've been doing this for 20 years now, other companies in our survey are telling us they get when we calculate what their share is. So 13% of community newspapers are operating at what we would call this best practice level. Some examples of what's in this quadrant or this rectangular area here. And I can't give you the names of these folks because everybody participates on a non-disclosure basis, a confidential basis. So we can't release the names of those who participate in the survey, but we know every single one of those dots. So what you see in this chart, those above 30% in smaller markets, is a 22,000 circulation daily. That makes 3.5 million in digital. 14,000 daily, 1.1 million in digital. Daily, 1,000 daily. 600, 2.1 per 1,000. So hard, there is a million, 3.5 available, and being some of the, I warn you again, if your mind is kicking in and saying, yeah, well, how are they including this? Are they including that? You're bordering on, believe them all, you might not be skeptical as I'm portraying you to be, but you know the people on your staff who are. Look for them and ask them. I didn't say it. Yes, I did. Benchmarks for daily newspapers. Matt, why don't we stop here before I go into some of these benchmarks and see if you have any questions. If you have any questions, type them in the chat box, and I'd be happy to stop and be interrupted. I'll ask another time prior to the end, and then we can also take more questions at the end. Matt, how we doing? Keep moving, or do we have any questions?
We have a few questions that came in, Gordon. One of them was, you've mentioned community newspapers a couple of different times. When you say that term, community newspapers, how do you define that? Like, is it non-dailies, smaller, is it a CERC threshold? How do you look at community newspapers when you use that term? Like, what is your definition of that?
I would say that probably 95%, 90% maybe of newspapers are community newspapers by our definition. We would factor out the large metro papers. So Miami, New York, Boston, Dallas, the big metro papers, LA, et cetera, would be taken out. Um, so you might go, oh, well, so that would be, maybe Harrisburg, Patriot News is a community newspaper. Oh yeah, and no, the definition is more derived by those who participate in the survey. So when you look at those who participate, it's not the Chicago Tribune, the Miami Herald, San Jose Mercury News, LA Times, etc. It's a lot of smaller rural newspapers. We had a lot of newspapers, and for this particular survey, it was just kind of odd because we had 0 newspapers in California. Those people are just really wildly liberal anyway, so we don't want to include them. I didn't say that. Yes, I did. Uh, there are a lot of Midwest newspapers in that particular survey. A lot of folks in Wisconsin and down into the Dakotas and down. So it was really a lot of Middle America papers that responded in that survey, and there really weren't any big metro papers. So that was kind of a loose definition. When we looked at the spending levels, what we saw when we asked people who participate in various surveys that we see a lot of people saying they're spending, their budgets, it might be 2, 3, 4% saying that their budgets are, $1 million or more. And when we looked at this particular survey of newspaper buyers, there wasn't a single one that was above $1 million. And most of them were at, 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 total advertising budget. That's really small. Those are the demographics of it. Next question.
This one you may touch on a little bit later, but I'll throw it out here because the question did come in. When you're looking at those digital products you laid out there between banner and video and all those different things, which ones align best with the print product as easier to convert? I think is what the question is trying to address.
Yeah, that's a really good question. If it's the newspaper seller selling the digital, banners, and maybe even targeted banners. But there was a question in the survey, it's not reflected here, and that is, what do you sell? It was of newspaper managers. Does your sales staff sell product, or does your sales staff sell audience? And there was a bit of a problem there in that everybody thinks you should be selling audience. But when you think about it, if you're selling properly, it's a judgment call, I guess. You should be selling audience, the value of your audience and how big that audience is. It is so easy to say, we are going to give you this audience, and they're not only in the newspaper, but they're also online, and there's a certain amount that doesn't overlap. And then we can also sell you audience extension. So if your demo is 18 to 24-year-old females who have an income of 30,000 or more, and we can get those for you online more than we can get them in the printed newspaper. And yeah, some are coming to our site, but we can get the other 95% that aren't coming to our site on audience extension. So I think banners are just probably the simplest thing. For the Yellow Pages guys, by the way, which are in competition with you, search is easier for them to sell because hell, that's what they do, right? Lookups. So they resell search engine marketing. Having said that, I think the next easiest thing for you to sell when you think about it is going to be video. Now you don't need a television station to be able to sell a television spot. You can sell it to your local advertisers, but it's not the TV spot, it's the story. So if you hear advertisers, and I can recall, I think I was in might have been in Lancaster or Erie, I can't recall, went on a call and was just really impressed. This is 20 years ago. It really made an impression on me where an advertiser said what they often say, and that is, I'm the best kept secret. I have a great, great company. It's been around forever and nobody knows about me because he doesn't advertise, right? So you can certainly help them tell that story in print, but you can help them tell that story a hell of a lot better in video. And it's just so easy to sell. It appeals to the ego. You just need to have the capability of producing a video, and that's really not that much. Those two things, banner, and I think upcoming quickly, video.
So another question, referencing back to something you said before, why should we be keeping an eye on local radio?
You're gonna have to hold on for that.
Okay, a little teaser for the future. That is the questions we have right now. Everyone can post them into chat to organizer, and we'll keep passing them to Gordon as we continue the presentation.
Okay, we surveyed this year 1,016 daily newspapers, and we're actually about to publish our report. This is one of the charts from it. Half of them were making less than $500,000 in digital revenue. And I'm showing you this because it's not just the advertising portion. The title of this is about digital agencies. We're now finding that 40, 50, in some cases, 70% of the total digital revenue being reported by newspapers are coming from agency-like services or digital marketing services. I'll define those in a moment. $500,000 to $1 million, 15%, 1 to 5 million, 27%, big bump there, 9%. Obviously, the Metro Dailies, more than 5 million. So that just gives you a little more perspective. You can't go around going, wow, everybody's making more than $1 million. No, they're not. 64%, 2/3 are making less than $1 million or $1 million or less. So just to give you a little perspective on that, we also surveyed 676 weeklies. Those of you with weekly newspapers, we would define a weekly as less than 3 days a week. In fact, dailies are 3 days a week or more. So those that are truly weekly newspapers, most of them, as you can see, are making less than $250,000. Majority of them, 50 or 76%, are making less than $100,000. So again, just offering a little perspective. Interestingly enough, some of those making more than $500,000 are in really, really small markets. They're not, it's just a giant weekly newspaper. It's a weekly newspaper that thinks very differently and sees the opportunity in a much bigger way than most do. So what's the problem? It looks like we have about 20 minutes. I've got probably about 10 more of presentation. So I'll take some questions at the end, but if you have questions, as Matt said, please do type them in. So follow me here in a couple of the next slides. This is a survey we did of newspaper managers, 220 of them representing about 1,000 newspapers. And we also asked Pennsylvania newspaper managers, and you'll see the results of that in some of this here as well. So the main graphics you're going to see of the overall survey of managers of community newspapers across the country, and then I'll plug in some of the findings we had when we asked the same question to Pennsylvania newspapers. So what we wanted to know was two things. What was your confidence, your staff's confidence in the products that you're selling, digitalizing and digital service? So how much confidence do you have in those products? Your staff have, your sales staff. And then we also asked, what's the competency of your staff and staff those digital services products? So as you can see, there ain't no problem in print. 87% were very to extremely confident in the products. And 86% said the sales staff was very to extremely competent in their ability to sell it. That's pretty high. Pennsylvania newspaper, same results. Yay, check off print, done. Let's look at digital. 80%, very to extremely confident in the products. 40% say sales staff is very to extremely competent. Ooh, there's a problem. So high confidence, just as, remember that slide with the orange bars, just as the advertisers are confident in those digital products that they're buying from newspapers. So the sales staff is very confident in the products, but not so confident in the competency or the ability to sell it. Pennsylvania newspapers, even less so. Not actually confident as much in the products, and even less confident, confident in the ability or the competencies to sell those products. So let's look at digital marketing services. That was digital advertising. This is digital services. Again, I'll define them in a moment, but they're mostly SEO, social media management, email management, things like that. So again, very high, 83% of newspaper managers very to extremely confident in the products of digital services. 24% say their sales staff is competent in selling them. And the Pennsylvania newspaper survey results, much, much lower confidence in the products themselves and about the same in the competency in selling them. So there is definitely a problem there. We wanted to kind of explore just a little bit more where that problem was. And I'll get to the digital services stuff in just a couple of slides here. We asked about sales training. We thought, well, maybe the problem is sales training. What type of training does your company need? And you can see in the overall survey, the blue bar, selling digital advertising and selling digital services were fairly high. Digital services was the highest. 64% said we need more of that. With Pennsylvania newspaper responses, not so much. Half as many said we need sales training and selling digital services. Perhaps because, well, the answer will be on slide 34. So that's what it looks like in terms of where you need to, we don't need this, advertising or training in selling print. Yeah, we could use, half of us say we could use some selling training in digital advertising, a lot more in selling digital services. Half say, yeah, we could use training in selling the package. So that's what's going on there. When we look at, when it comes to hiring sales reps, which skill levels are the most important to you? Sort of a leading indicator of what's important to the overall sales staff. Yeah, we need more people with experience in selling digital advertising and digital services. That was the highest overall for the newspaper survey. That was the number one thing. 72% of the respondents said, yeah, that's one thing we really look for in sales reps. Not so much length of experience selling, although that's important to us. And you can see the difference between the PNA survey, and it was a small sample. It was 36 respondents, about 102 newspapers, but still a bit relevant because of the big difference in knowledge of your geographic area. The PNA newspapers, that red bar, said, yeah, that was really important. But overall, other newspaper managers said, nah, not so important. We get people from other areas coming in, that'll be fine. We'll train them on that. And then the big change, a big difference in selling digital services. So you get the point there. Let's look at the confidence in strategies. And we asked, and the PNA responses are in red. How confident are you in your company's ability? And this is on a scale of 100. Company's overall strategy to meet advertisers' needs. Yeah, not bad. 82% confidence, 78% for PNA responses, 72% overall digital strategy for both readers and building a digital business, and then the confidence in the ability to sustain the print business, generally a bit lower for everybody. So those were actually pretty high. We're finding people feeling good these days about their overall strategies, which is good. At the lower level, which is sales competency, that's where the problem is. It's absolutely there. There's generally high confidence. I think there's a little shaky confidence in the products for PNA members, but generally high confidence in products overall, less confidence in the ability and the competency to sell. Thus, training is the issue. That sales staff is the issue. So let's take a look quickly at why some agencies failed. It looks like we've got about 15 minutes. I've got about 5 more presentation here, and then we'll open it up to questions. First, let me define digital services to you. What are they? What I did here was take, and this is hot off the presses, we just did this for 2021. This is across the entire country. What businesses with fewer than 100 employees, a small business, spends on digital marketing services overall, and this is in the billions. So the way to read this was across the entire United States, businesses with fewer than 100 employees spend $98 billion this year on web hosting. Reason that's in dark blue, as is CRM or customer relationship management, which now integrates with digital, is in blue, and that's because you really can't sell those things unless you're Amazon. You can sell web hosting. All the other things in orange are things you can sell. In fact, the number 2 thing on there, website design and maintenance, and the number 4 thing, SEO, are the 2 largest categories of categories of services that media-born digital agencies, newspaper agencies, are selling. Digital agencies. Again, website design and maintenance, SEO, 2 biggest categories of things that newspaper digital agencies are selling. So there's a lot of stuff there. You may be trying to get into reputation management or listings claimings or things like that. Those are really small. Think big. The big money, website design and maintenance, there's high margin in that. And online video production, that is big, and it's continuing to grow really big, and it certainly integrates with placement of those videos, which is advertising. So there is slide 34, and there is the issue. We asked, does your newspaper offer digital services? And this was just of PNA members. So here's our answer as to how many of you, or what percentage of you, are actually selling digital services. And the way I interpret this is, if you add those 2 slices down there, 53% of you aren't into the whole services thing all that much. Yeah, we offer 1 or 2 types of services. Well, if you offer 1 or 2 types, you're really not a digital agency, are you? You're just offering a couple things that maybe some of your clients will buy. Those who are offering an array of digital services, 47%. Again, a small sample, but I think pretty representative of what we would see if we added everybody to the equation. I think you might see that we don't offer digital services grow, especially if you surveyed more of the weekly newspaper crowd, because they're just not doing that. In a lot of cases, the editor also sells the advertising and delivers the newspapers. So understandable there. But for any of you of any size, particularly the daily newspapers, half of you, I suppose, are offering an array or maybe 4 or 5 different types of things that would qualify you as an agency-like business. Okay, let's talk about the failures. I've got some failures, I've got some successes, I've got some ideas for you, and then we'll open it up to questions. Some of you may remember these, especially if you in the past 10 to 15 years have gone out to conferences or read trade publications and heard of the Cedar Rapids Gazette's Fusion Farm. That was their digital agency, or Advocate Digital Media in Victoria, Texas. That was their digital agency, or Treehouse Digital at the Lancaster Intelligencer, or Big Fish Digital with Red Wing Publishing in Minnesota. And I could go on and name a whole bunch of these that have just collapsed. Remember Lawrence.com? Hell, that was part of an NPR series in 2007, I believe it was, or 2006. And they were like Convergence USA, Lawrence, Kansas. Go to Lawrence.com and see what you find now. Remember the Tampa Bay Tribune and Media General and that whole convergence operation? If you were around in 2000, you remember that. Hell, they had a full-time tour guide to take media companies through that place. So that was the WFAA television station and Tampa Tribune newspaper, and TBO.com. Go to TBO.com and see what you find. Gone. Fusion Farm, gone. Advocate Digital Media, gone. Treehouse Digital, gone. Big Fish Digital. They all failed, and I'll show you why in a moment, principally because there wasn't buy-in from the top, not because the market opportunity was not there. The market opportunity continues to be there. In fact, it's probably twice as big or bigger than when they first envisioned these things maybe 10 years ago. Successes are, and we'll get into the question of why radio. 2060 Digital, Hubbard Radio, very successful. They operate this in 9 of the radio markets, and they're expanding it to markets where they don't have radio stations. That is their digital venture. High Road Agency, really cool operation, operated by Jones Media, now owned by Adams Publishing. Started out in Greenville, Tennessee, moved a little bit to the east to Tri-Cities, Tennessee, into a larger market where there was larger opportunity. Still exists today, doing about $1.5 million in revenue. Town Square Interactive, It's got 500 or 600 people. It's part of Town Square Radio, completely separate digital venture. Fascinating. Gives you a key as to what the strategy is or should be for you. And that is, they have a huge digital agency that goes into each of their individual radio markets by telephone, by the way. They don't have a physical presence. They're located centrally in Charlotte. You go to each of their markets, they look at all the people buying radio, and they don't touch that part. They touch the list that is not buying radio. They sell them digital, and after 3 to 6 months, they try to convert them over to radio. So it's a market share play. In any individual market, I guarantee there's 80, 75%, maybe 80% of all businesses are not buying newspaper advertising. There's your opportunity. Sell them digital and then convince them to come over to the newspaper, because the newspaper can amplify what they're doing in digital. It certainly can. That's Town Square's strategy with radio. Amplified digital agency with Lee Enterprises, very successful operation serving all of its newspaper operations. So there are lots of successes. In fact, a lot more than the failures out there. One more focus on radio, and I'll give you some lessons about the agencies that we've learned. This comes from some research we did earlier in the year, and benchmarking we did since 2016 with the Radio Advertising Bureau, showing that in 2016, 21%, this is a line chart at the top, 21% of radio stations had started digital agencies or selling digital services, moving to 37% to 58% to where it was this year. 81% of radio stations are selling digital services, at least one type of them. A lot of them have started their own agencies. In rural markets, a lot of people, individuals, view the radio station. You saw this in the content slide I showed at the very beginning. View the radio station as a content provider, a news provider for their community. And the radio station is a part of the community much more so than, say, the TV station, which may be outside of the market, outside of the county at least. So they're more of affinity for radio. Be careful. Have you ever seen a client in your market or anybody in your market with a bumper sticker for your newspaper? Now, have you ever seen anybody in your market with a bumper sticker for the local radio station? Yeah, there are lots of them. They identify with them, whether it's country music or hip hop or old style rock and roll, stuff like that. So be careful of these guys. This is a type of digital services that stations are selling. The bar chart at the bottom, SEO, social media management, website design and development are the three most prominent ones. They too are getting into video production because there's a lot of money in it. Must-haves, these are my conclusions, and we'll get to the questions in just about 2 minutes. For an agency to survive within a local media company, and we've done a lot of work on this, you've got to have a very clear vision. What are you trying to do? Are you just chasing dollars? That's not a clear vision. You got to have that clear vision. You've got to have a champion. That's a person with really, really good communication skills. That is where most of these agencies failed that I mentioned a couple slides back. You have to have complete buy-in from the CEO or owner or board, complete buy-in. A lot of them, if you're with a family-run company, derive dividends or income from the newspaper, and they don't like to see that decline, that quarterly dividend that they get. So they really have to have buy-in and understand that this is an investment. They also need to know that they've got to have the ability to see this operation sustain losses for 18 months to 3 years. And they also need to have a measurable goal to serve two masters. And those two masters would be the newspaper. So they're serving the newspaper's goals somehow by providing some stickiness to keep the print advertisers on board, and non-newspaper clients, going after a larger market share than your newspaper alone would be able to pursue. So those are the must-haves for agencies. And now I'll open it up to questions. And while you're typing your questions in the chat box, I'll plug our podcast. We have a podcast we run every other week. The last one, which is airing right now, is on digital agencies. Were they a bad idea? So you'll hear some familiar things that we talk about in this, and some interviews with some people who have agencies that failed. The next one, which will be released next Monday, will be about ones that have succeeded. We have interviews with some really great companies that succeeded. And then the third one we're going to do 2 weeks after that is what's the future of these agencies? We see a really interesting future that includes these agencies as a centerpiece of their local communities. So I hope you can tune into that. If you want to download the deck, there's the URL. We have some other resources listed. And Matt, I am going to turn it over to you for questions. We have, excuse me, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Gordon. One of the questions we came in is, you've covered a lot of the products we should be looking at. What digital products would you tell a newspaper to avoid trying to sell?
That's a good question. I would be careful about SEM and social media boosted posts. The reason is that they work, okay, but you get really low margins. They work, and they work great. Get it through your head. Social media works great for advertisers. There are a lot of sucky things about it. It's an echo chamber. The likes aren't what they want to be, but they advertisers perceive that they work. So be careful there. And SEM and SEO work, but you're reselling a product with SEM. You're reselling boosted posts. Therefore, the margins are low. What you want to do is serve them in those areas and then wean them off them if they can to something that actually works a bit better for them. So I'd be careful. The low margin products, I wouldn't stay away from them entirely. I would consider them for what they are, and that is, in a lot of cases, lost leaders. SEM is a different thing than SEO. SEO can have very high margins, 50%, 100% margins.
Another question came in on video, as you've been talking about. It's a area we should be going after. When papers are proposing the cost to the advertiser, do they include typically the production, or is that a separate line item?
I have an opinion. But I don't. I'm trying to go through empirical data that we have that says, and we just don't have it. My opinion is, I believe it's a separate line item for the ones that are serious about it. Others may include it in production in the cost of the advertising. However, the cost of production is fairly high. That would be a stupid idea. Fairly high, I mean, it costs you money to do this stuff. You've got a camera, that's capital cost. You have a lavalier at least, or an extended mic. Hope you're not doing it with your iPhone. You've got time. You might need to script it. You might need lights and things like that. You can shoot it with your iPhone. But if you're not breaking out those costs for the advertisers to let them know, then they might equate the total cost of the advertising with the production, and that's going to be unfair.
Understand there. And this might be referencing back to the point you'd highlighted in the previous slide there, but those papers that are receiving 30% or higher of the addressable digital income, what traits do you see of their salespeople out in the field that are helping them hit that number?
That's a great question. The question should be asked on that scattergram. The sales staff takes a very surgical approach to the market. They know what advertisers are spending, what types of businesses are spending, and how much. And they've broken the habit of the old method of, I think I'll drive over here to the shopping center where I see a grand opening sign in a florist store and go talk to them about their advertising. That's a rat wheel. Those are the lowest form of advertisers. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. The ones that are doing better are looking at the data for their markets and understanding where that money is and going, hey, how come there's like $10 million here in this category we don't even know about? And what we'll tell them as they look at that data often is, well, instead of driving down Main Street or going into some of the shopping centers, your sales reps probably need to wander into industrial parks. If you look at Lancaster, for instance, Lancaster is about the size of Harrisburg, and I'm just talking Lancaster County. About the size of Harrisburg in total advertising, about $228 million. The addressable portion is $148 million. How could that be? Well, there's some really large corporations in Lancaster's. Don't you think they could use some video? Don't you think they could use some search engine optimization, some website design and development? And you might go, well, I'm too not sophisticated enough to do that. Please, you can, find a way to do that. They're buying it, they're looking for help, and they want a trusted local partner. So there.
Well, Gordon, we're right at time, and I know you had some other stuff going on today. So thank you for participating today and sharing this, the valuable information with our speakers. Is there any last note you'd like to leave the community newspapers on the call with?
Sure. I can poke fun. I can make it sound like this is the absolute route you have to go, and you're stupid if you don't. But the reality is, you've got to make your own decision at your own newspaper, given the ownership and the preference of the paper. A lot of newspapers are unfortunately in straitjackets because of financial situation and revenue declining. And by the way, we don't see that changing. There might be a bit of a bump this year, but gosh, guys, look back at the past 20 years. It's just really not going to change. Don't make that depressing. Make that, channel that into this opportunity. I'll just go back and underline one more thing, and that is the size of the opportunity in your local markets. I don't care how small you are or where you are. The size of the opportunity, I guarantee you, is bigger than you're thinking. It's bigger. You just have to convince yourself of that, and then go convince the owners of that, and then pursue it. Find ways to pursue it. Start out small. That's always the best way to do it, and then build from there. So thank you very much for having me. I hope this was useful. I hope you guys can find some use in the deck itself when you download it.
Thank you again, Gordon, and we'll be sending all this information out to all of our attendees coming this Monday. So everyone have a great day, enjoy the summer, and come back for our next session next week, and we hope to see you then. Thank you, everyone.